As we note in our introductory podcast on Zoroastrianism, historians have a much better understanding of Indian mythology from South and Southeast Asia than they have of Aryan tales from Central Asia. This can be attributed in part to the highly fragmented and incomplete scriptural records that Mazda worshippers left in the wake of their repeated defeats by wave after wave of foreign invaders. Central Asian civilizations experienced much more warfare and social instability than civil societies of ancient India. And this can be explained in part on the basis of India's geographic isolation, i.e., a natural defense behind the Himalaya mountains, which helped the Indians develop and then preserve their incomparably rich legacy of mythic and iconographic records. Conversely, we have almost nothing in the way of narrative imagery of the Zoroastrians to help us interpret Mazda worship mythic scenes. Only this or that portrait or snapshot of a few mythic players that comprise a minor component of the Zoroastrian pantheon. As a consequence, mythologists and art historians must work with a rather fractured archaeological record to explore the once influential impacts of the Persians on Old World civilizations. This podcast intends to cover a variety of interrelated mythic themes with two general purposes. One is to compare Perso-Aryan mythic motifs that relate to the haoma-plant with contemporaneous portrayals of the haoma-plant in Indian mythology of the Vedas. And secondly, we shall attempt to verify a new round of interpretations on mythic and artistic records in light of what we have come to know about various chronological strata of Perso-Aryan history, and what we now know about the haoma-plant's identity as the sacred lotus of the East, the Lumbo nucifera. Tales of ancient Iran and Central Asia, not so unlike those of India, were originally communicated and conserved over generations through the use of memorable hymns, the earliest renditions of which are referred to as the songs, as the gathas in the Avestan language. But only 17 of these prehistoric hymns, amounting to perhaps 25% of the original corpus, have survived the violent history of Mazda worshippers. So we are left today with precious few points of mythic reference with which to reconstruct a complete or comprehensive perspective on the pre-literate, the prehistoric beliefs and practices of Perso-Aryan tribes. Nevertheless, a significant portion of what was lost to bonfires in antiquity found its way into scriptural documents of later origin, some in a modified form, but still conserving many, if not most, of the prehistoric themes that we encounter in the ancient gathas, ancient songs of the Perso-Aryans. Prehistoric hymns of Zarathustra's followers focus primarily on the mythic interactions between Ahura Mazda, the creator of the universe, and a host of divine beings that he created at the dawn of time. Among these creatures are those that serve the purpose of the Creator's good works, as they call them, and those members of the human race that decide to provide a countervailing force against the adversaries of the Creator, the Lord of Wisdom, Ahura Mazda. It seems that the agents of death on earth, whom are led by Angra Mainyu, a god of death and decay, along with a host of his demonic associates, known collectively as the Daevas, or the Druj, generally assume serpent forms that are hell-bent on slaughtering the celestial, sun-like entourage of Ahura Mazda's heavenly host. This cosmic drama was instigated at the dawn of time and is predicted to play itself out, once and for all, over the course of universal time. The life-defying Daevas focus their attentions on thwarting the good thoughts and acts of Mazda, Lord of Wisdom, by accosting a group of 6 archangels known as the Serpents, the bounteous immortals, as well as God's chosen human emissary on earth, the prophet Zarathustra. Each of the Serpents embodies a specific virtue of their creator, and they act individually in accord with universal truth, referred to as asha in Zoroastrian tradition. Another key player in Zoroastrian cosmogenesis is a divine cow by the name of Go-Servan, who offers up her body in sacrifice as part of a divine ritual that transfers her animal's life force into the Perso-Aryan tree of immortal life, also known as the Homa or the plant. Unfortunately, Gathic details relating to the mythic connections between the holy cow and the sacred tree are very sparing and obscure due to the destruction of most of the Gathic verses over the course of time. But this mythic relationship between a plant and an animal is key to understanding Perso-Aryan concepts of time, human salvation, and their achievement of immortal life. When we consider the following snippet from a refrain of the Gathas, and I quote, "So let the one and only cow give forth that which is the bountiful gift. Let her give the tree of the Lord, and let her become the source of increase." In this verse, we find that the cow and the immortalizing plant of the gods are functionally part of the same life force, but only vaguely so. Not because the myth is vague, but because it's hopelessly incomplete after all the travails that the Zoroastrians have suffered over the course of human history. A large portion of Gathic verses memorialize a conversation that once took place between Zarathustra, the chosen prophet of Ahura Mazda, and Go-Servan, the holy cow, which takes place as this divine creature lays dying, having been afflicted, the Gathas say, with a lethal disease that was instigated by Angramanyu and his pack of Daevas. During the conversation, Zarathustra receives a revelation from the Lord of Wisdom that explains the origin of pain and death among living creatures on earth. Mazda advises Zarathustra on what must be accomplished to restore and preserve the life-giving plants and waters that sustain the Aryan tribes and their prophet. This mysterious wisdom, or Maya, of Ahura Mazda explains the origin and nature of good and evil and the eternal character of heaven and hell, as was ordained by the will of the father of the gods, Ahura Mazda. So Zarathustra accepts his creator's invitation to serve as a spiritual intermediary, a messenger and a prophet between the human race and its creator. The use of the term Maya to account for a peculiar sort of mysterious wisdom in Avestan material is interesting, because the same term was employed by Indian Aryans for the creative powers of the Brahmanic pantheon, Maya. And in fact, countless Gathic passages employ many key Avestan words, as well as mythic themes that are perfectly consonant with those that were used by Sanskrit speakers in formulating the Vedic hymns of ancient India. This would include such themes as those that relate to the origin of the material world, and the stealing or sacrifice of a mythic cow that sustains the cosmos with her very special milk and butter, and a cosmic plant that confers eternal life on an alliance of 7 holy spirits, which includes Ahura Mazda and the holy 6 immortals, the Serpents. So the holy immortals operate as unique and independent spirits that manifest the divine attributes of Ahura Mazda himself. When Zarathustra poses the rhetorical questions to Mazda, what is the most fiend-smiting? What is the best healing? What destroys the malice of Devas and men? What makes the material world best come to the fulfillment of the world's wishes? What frees the material world best from the anxieties of the heart? Ahura Mazda responds to all of these rhetorical questions succinctly as, "Our name, O Spitama Zarathustra, who are the Amesha-Spintas." And he says this as if all the gods, together as one, fulfill a singular good cause of living creation. But other Avestan passages emphasize that the Amesha-Spintas are distinct and autonomous beings of Ahura Mazda's making, not just his aspects, by stating, "I, Ahura Mazda, invoke the glory of the Amesha-Spintas, whom all seven have one and the same thinking, one and the same doing, one and the same Father and Lord, Ahura Mazda." Later mythic scriptures that are less fractured than the Gathas describe all of these immortal spirits as being solar in aspect. For example, the Korshed Nyayis states, "Hail unto you, O Amesha-Spintas, who are, all of you, of one accord with the sun." And in this light, several of the Amesha-Spintas bring their shining celestial powers down to earth, including the Amesha-Spintas known as Ameratat and Harvatat. Now, Ameratat, a title that is cognate with Amrita in Sanskrit, or Amurdad in Pahlavi, and means literally immortality, or in Sanskrit, Soma, the divine elixir of immortality. Persia's Ameratat is a plant god that manifests his solar qualities in plants, primarily as an attendant spirit to the immortalizing tree of life known as Homa. And while prehistoric hymns of the Gathas identify Ameratat as the Lord of Plants, as a Vanaspati, a title that we may recall is a title for Soma, Pavamana, in the Vedic hymns, scriptures of later origins that employ Gathic themes identify Ameratat explicitly as the creator of the haoma-plant and of the bundled stems, known as the barsum, that are collected, bundled, and then pressed for their inebriating sap during haoma drinking rituals. So we find early on that the Indo and Perso-Aryan plant gods, namely Soma and Homa, share similar titles, share similar solar features, and similar critical mythic roles in assisting mortals in becoming immortal. This being the ultimate goal of all Mazda worshippers. The closest divine associate of the plant god Ameratat is a spirit of fresh waters known as Harvatat, or as Hordad in Pahlavi. This god of water plays a critical role in helping engender Ahura Mazda's immortalizing tree as well. Together as one, these two holy immortals, that would be genii of plants and waters, together, enjoy the loyal support of the sole Amesha-Spinta that is a goddess, this being the Amesha-Spinta known as Spinta Armaiti by name, meaning a spirit of devotion, that creates the enclosures on earth in which Homa sacrifices are performed. In support of these spirits, the Amesha-Spinta Vohumano, known as Bauman in Pahlavi, who is the spirit of good thoughts, creates the sacrificial ox and the immortalizing butter of the cow, while the Amesha-Spinta known as Chatra, this god being a spirit of power, creates the required knife, mortar, and pestle to execute successful haoma-plant sacrifices. And then there is the holy mortal known as Asha, or Vahista, the nominal equivalent to Vahista in Vedic songs, who is associated with the hearth and sacrificial fires in Mazda Yasna temples. So apparently, collectively, the Amesha-Spentas play a critical role in the salvation of mortals by assisting in the sacrifice of the plant of the gods, Homa. Historians have noticed that there are no explicit references to the haoma-plant in what we have left of Gathic verses. Only a singular, glancing reference to a tree that confers immortal life. Moreover, the only direct and fleeting reference to the use of an inebriating substance in the Gathas alludes to the quote-unquote filthy ecstasy of drunken joy that is enjoyed by the demonic Karpans, the Druges, which a number of modern scholars in the present century have interpreted as no less than Zarathustra's rejection of Homa rituals. In my opinion, any and all scholarly notions that Zarathustra found the practice of Homa sacrifices objectionable, or in the words of the Gathas, filthy, seems patently absurd. If such were the case, then 90% of the Mazda Yaznian canon would have to be regarded as entirely corrupt, because the prophet's various biographies in post-Gathic sources, and essentially all historical Zoroastrian liturgies, refer constantly to the indispensable role of Homa drinking rituals, and the consistent role of a holy cow and the immortalizing tree of life in the delivery of the Homa beverage to Mazda worshippers is a theme that has endured for over 4,000 years. So I attribute the lack of references to Homa in the Gathas to its incomplete constitution at this point in time. The organic relationship between the spirits of waters and plants, Amritat and Harvatat, is constantly encountered in the Gathas, but the mythic roles behind these twin spirits is always sketchy in these ancient verses. Only in scriptural sources of later origin do we find that these bountiful immortals are specifically involved in Homa sacrifices, as revealed in one refrain of a very old yasna that circumscribes the essential elements of a Homa drinking session as such. These good thoughts, these good words and good deeds, these homas, meat offerings, and these acts of worships, these sauthras, this barsum, that is, cluster of Homa stems for pressing, spread with sanctity, this flesh, and the two, Harvatat and Amritat, even the flesh, the Homa and the Homa juice, and their perfume, this sacred lordship and chiefmanship. So these are hymns that are sung during the Homa sacrifice. And obviously they eulogize the role of this beverage in their rituals. A more complete portrait of these two holy immortals is circumscribed in later Avestan sources and the Zans, the commentaries on the liturgies, wherein Amritat and Harvatat are said to, quote-unquote, share an abode with Ahura Mazda in a shining, luminous space of the heavens known as the Gadon Mana paradise. This is because the spirits of plants and waters serve the will of Mazda on earth by assisting the sacred cow and the tree of immortal life in defeating a toxic brood of serpent fiends, much as they do in the prehistoric Gathas. Only through the defeat of these demons can all good creatures attain to the paradise of the gods in the future. According to a creation myth in the Zadsparam, the chief demon of deceit, known as Ahriman, the equivalent of Angra Mainyu in the Gathas, counters the good creations of Ahura Mazda by penetrating the center of the earth in the form of a serpent. After sinking himself into the ground, he begins to turn the earth black in color and to wither the tree of life. And this serves as well to infect the earth's holy cow and a primeval man by the name of Gaiomard with deadly diseases. The story goes something like this. The snake went to the water at the middle of the earth, and therein he resided and made the earth dark. Ahriman then approached a tree with a single root, the height of which was several feet. The tree was unbranched and had no bark, and was juicy and sweet. He withered that tree. Then Ahriman went to the sacred ox on the banks of the deity river in the middle of the earth, which was white and as brilliant as the moon. While Ahriman was advancing upon the holy cow, Ahura Mazda rubbed the medicinal plant called bang on the ox's eyes to prevent her death. And beside this plant, the progenitor of the human race, Gaiomard, stood a third the size of Zarathustra, and although he was tall, radiant, and brilliant like the sun, Gaiomard could see no light, but only noxious creatures that had invaded the earth. So Ahriman mingled darkness and smoke with the sacred fires of Ahura Mazda. So this is a latter-day text, an extract from a later text, but it's very much like the prehistoric Gathas, in that it presents a confluence of mythic themes that are familiar to the Aryan tribes of India, in that they begin by describing a mythic stage that is suited for a cosmic battle between the powers of life and death. The principal players in this Iranian conflict include a sacred plant that grows in water, a vile brood of deadly serpents that pervade the earth underneath the tree of life, and also a pair of Ahura Mazda's favorite devotees, a sacred cow and a quasi-personified solar human figure, whom together confront the very embodiment of death itself, Ahriman. And when we consider the passages that describe Mazda's unbranched tree as having no bark, juicy stems about the size of a man, and a sweet smell, in water, all of which features were shared by India's famous haoma-plant, there are few, if any, mythic themes here that would seem out of place in, let's say, Vedic mythology of ancient India. But the parallels do not stop there. The accomplices of Ahriman in this tale are referred to as either Druj or Rakshas, the exact same titles that apply to the serpent demons against the sun gods in the Vedas of India. So Ahura Mazda, in all his wisdom, sees fit to create a host of celestial serpent slayers, which are entitled Virathagnyas, meaning serpent slayers, the Vedic equivalent, Vritrahans. They have what it takes to counter the gathering dragons, whose numbers are said to appear by the thousands in the sacred tree's waters. In the Zatsparam, the sacred tree and serpents live in Lake Kasava, the so-called regions of the dawn, where the waters have become defiled by filth and filled with pollution and infections. And because the Persian serpent-broods that surround the tree of life are tenacious creatures, they attack the tree year after year under the leadership of several famous demons, known variously as Bwiti, as Aishma, Vidotu, and Apausha. These bad guys are described as creepers, as fiendish snakes, known as azis, yet they are snakes that are green-hued, so presumably vegetative, and sometimes they're said to bear horns, a detail that is also shared by India's Vedic dragons, the Vritras. Some Persian drujas, such as the demoness Nasus, have a Vedic equivalent, specific one, and that would be the dasa known as Dasonasi, not Nasus, Nasi, an adversary of the storm god Indra in Vedic mythology. So Nasus of Persia belongs to a serpent clan that includes a three-headed dragon by the name of Dahaka. who apparently shares this three-headed condition with the famous Vedic dragon known as Vishvarupa. So as we can see, the names, the attributes, and activities of Persian serpent demons in the waters of Iran are quite similar to those of their counterparts in the Punjab. Consequently, since Brahmanic dragons have long been portrayed as underwater lotus stems in Indian iconography, it seems likely to me that the mythological serpent demons of ancient Iran also symbolize subterranean lotus stems with their serpentine and labyrinthine characteristics. And these stems experience a seasonal cycle of natural stem growth that is soon followed in the subsequent year by stem rot, hence the term of the serpent demon Nasus, this term meaning in Avestan decaying matter, the precise name of the serpent demon. Because these roots, these underground stems, I should say, they turn black and very smelly in the underworld. So, like they say in the mythic tale, they poison and turn the waters toxic. So, upon aging, lotus stems turn black and mushy and impart a rather repugnant odor to their dark and anaerobic muddy substrates, while new growth of these lotus stems send up sun-like flowers in the so-called regions of the dawn, on stalks that can attain the size of a man. All of these features being consistent with descriptions of the haoma-plant in the Zarathustra. Indeed, the Farvardan Yasht attributes the flow of sweet waters and the waxing of flowering aquatic plants as an after effect of the Ahura versus Deva conflict in Zoroastrian cosmology. To quote a passage from this Yasht, when Angramanyu broke into the creation of the good holiness, he came across Vohumanu and Atar, the spirits of good mind and divine fires. These two Ameshaspentos destroyed the malice of the fiend Angramanyu, so that the waters did not stop flowing, nor did the plants stop growing. But at once the most beneficent of waters, of the creator and the ruler, Ahura Mazda, flowered forward, and his plants just went on growing. This extract reads very much like verses from the Vedic hymns, especially in reference to Vedic Soma and Agni, the god of fire. As we point out in our episodes on Soma in the Vedas, both Soma and Agni were personified solar deities that similarly arose like fire from rivers after smiting aquatic serpent demons in the rivers and lakes of northwestern India. But what is really strange about these mythic themes is that the subject of dragons, of serpents in iconographic imagery of Iran is essentially unknown. There are no serpents, there are no dragons, there are no reptiles, none, zippo, in the archaeological record. This seems quite odd to me, given the ubiquity of Aryan dragons and lotus groves among Hindu and Buddhist temples throughout India and Southeast Asia. Nevertheless, religious imagery among the ruins of Zoroastrian temples focuses instead on lotus flowers and a variety of animals that are associated with members of the Zoroastrian pantheon, but mostly members of the alliance that backs Ahura Mazda. These being the standard avatars of the sky gods in ancient India, including a sacred cow, a sacred ram, lion, and eagle. Of these divine animals, the most important one in Persian mythology is, hands down, the sacred cow, known originally as Gosarvan by name, this title translating as either soul of the cow or cow plant. The Avestan word go, or gao, refers specifically to a bovid, and is therefore attached to various Indian gods and goddesses in Sanskrit as well, such as Gopati or Govinda, a name of Krishna, meaning Lord of the Cows or Protector of the Cows. Krishna assumes these titles in mythic roles as the keeper of his rosy cow damsels, the gopis, that rise into the heavens. Or in Buddhist tradition, we recognize the same word root, go, in the paternal name of Siddhartha, Gautama, a name that was very common and popular amongst the Vedic singers, the family name Gautama, which means literally supernal bull, or bull on high. Or, by the same token, it's likely that the same word go relates to the widespread use of the word God in Indo-European languages, Gott in German, Gud in Scandinavian, etc., which in all likelihood originally referred to this holy cow. The prehistoric Gathas inform us that the welfare of Aryan nations depends directly on the life of Go-Servan, due generally to her production of a precious sort of divine milk and butter. Consequently, when the life of Go-Servan is imperiled by Ahura Mazda, so too are the lives of the Mazda worshippers. Modern mythologists tend to interpret these allusions to the importance of cattle and dairy products to the diets of early Aryan pastoralists. And yet, when verses refer to the Daevas as marauding cattle bandits, most historians interpret this mythic theme as a reference to cattle poaching. But I think modern mythologists have really missed the point here, because such interpretations ignore the mythic significance of the role of Go-Servan and the role of Ahura Mazda, and that is to return life back to the Druge-infected haoma-plants. And as we shall soon see, the milk of the cow is equivalent to the milky sap of haoma-plants, much as it was in Vedic tradition of the Indo-Aryans. Lucky for us, the Goshast, the hymn dealing with the holy cow, fills us in on some missing information that was lost from the fragmented Gathic corpus. In the Goshast, Go-Serun, a Pahlavi pronunciation of Go-Servan, seems to represent the spirit of Aryan cowherds. However, these herds comprise a special variety of oxen, in that Go-Serun is said to, and I quote, yoke a team of horses to a resplendent chariot, whose glistening and fattening wheels on a wheel-possessing car tours the wide pastures of Mazda. Now that's a very strange cow. And in this mythic light, she seems to share all the characteristics and behaviors of the Persian sun god Mithra, who similarly drives a resplendent chariot, glistening in gold, and representing a wheel-possessing car of the wide pastures of Mazda. So Ghosh is essentially equivalent to the celestial dawns of the Vedas, the Ushas, which they say drip with soma. This motif is not, in fact, all that surprising, since the Vedas of ancient India, then, employ the same symbolic associations. For we may recall that Soma is a sun god himself, and is said to produce milky sap on his golden car, and or also from his swollen golden udders, because the Soma plant is related to the golden udders that flow with the elixir of immortality. Or similarly, the Vedic goddess of the solar dawns, known as the Ushas, are also bovine in character, insofar as the Ushas sons, born in multitudes, are praised for their bounteous golden udders that flow with Soma itself. So these cows are a special type. They're winged and celestial. In Persian mythology, a similar cow is described as a bright and glorious creation of Ahura Mazda, a sacred creature to whom haoma libations and meat are to be offered. And like a number of her Vedic homologues, Persia's holy cow is both a sacrifice and a spirit to whom sacrifices are made. a concept that applies equally to Soma Pavamana in the Rig Veda. And how might this cosmic cow bring immortality to the world? Well, she does this by overcoming the three-headed serpent, Azi, the serpent Dahaka. Obviously, such strange combinations of metaphors and mythic themes are incomprehensible to us at this point, to us, the uninitiated. And they give us to question just what were these people smoking? And it turns out that they were not smoking anything, because they were drinking something. And the celebrated status of that libation is proclaimed unreservedly in the Hom-Yasht. Thus spoke Zarathustra, praise be to Homa, Mazda maid.